Ultimately, as we worked with the same gastroenterologist in pediatrics until he aged out, which was just last year. He stayed until he was 22. And again, I have a great deal of appreciation. But one of the things he would always say is, I treat a lot of Black boys, and Black boys just won't complain. They'll be in pain. And that was actually representative of our case. They'll be in pain. They'll be not doing well. And I ask them, and they'll just not complain. And it was complete misunderstanding of why Black people, Black boys, Black community, Black families don't complain. Because when we do complain, either we can be easily dismissed, we can be mocked, we can be ignored, we can be emasculated, specifically for Black men and young Black boys. And there was no understanding of that.
Coming in, flex. I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2233, I'm on 10 again.
Welcome to Coming in Hot, where we discuss health opinions and truths with the context of culture and community. Today's episode is going to be titled The Blame Game, where we're talking to a patient and a parent about their journey with managing chronic illness. Before we dive deep into this episode, I am going to pass the mic to our guest. Latonia, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hi, my name is Latonia Ward. And I am a patient of 30 years with Crohn's. And I am currently serving as the Director of Community and Culture for COGI.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Mel. I'm Chrissy Thornton. I am super excited and proud to be the current board chair for Color of Crohn's and Chronic Illness, among several other things, including being a mother to a Crohn's disease patient diagnosed at age 11, who is now age 23.
Awesome. Matthew?
What's up, everybody? Matthew McCurdy. Co-host of this podcast, also co-founder, executive director of Black Health.
Welcome, everyone. So excited to have Matthew here always, and especially to have both of you ladies here because, one, Chrissy, you are chair. I'm so honored and privileged to have you serving as our chair. And Latonia, you are fellow patient like myself and partner in this life that as we navigate as patients, but a director who serves the community also. I actually want to start with you because you have had a very interesting journey. So you were diagnosed initially with ulcerative colitis. You've been recently diagnosed with Crohn's. Can you share your journey with us?
Absolutely. I was diagnosed early at the age of 17 years old. I didn't have a long process to be diagnosed.
Right.
However, when I was diagnosed, the diagnosis kept changing. I wasn't told that I had certain conditions like C-Diff, and I was never given any medication other than steroids and inflammation medicine.
Okay.
I didn't know all of this until recently, in August of last year, actually, because I didn't have my medical records. And when I had requested my medical records, I was told that they had been destroyed because after so long, they don't keep them.
Okay.
But when I went into the office one day, it was just a blessing that the lady was like, oh yeah, we have them in the system. And she gave me my medical records. And so reading through my charts, I realized that there was a lot going on that I didn't know about.
So wait, you recently found, was that like within the last 5 years? Or when you say recently, how recently did you get your records?
About in August of last year.
Wow. So not even a year ago.
No,
Okay.
Hasn't been a year.
And when were you diagnosed initially? You said 17. What year was that?
1993.
And you hadn't had your records since then?
No.
You just got them 6 months ago. Wow.
Yes.
And it's 2023, 29 years?
Yes.
Ooh, okay.
30 years. So it's a lot of, I was a kid. So,
Right.
And I'm from Mississippi, so we don't question doctors. in the South, they're like an authority figure at some point. So whatever they tell you, you go with it.
I think we all regard doctors as
Absolutely.
authority figure. We trust them. They literally have our lives in their hands.
Right.
They can navigate our procedures. They call in our prescriptions. If there's an emergency and we're not responsive, they have our lives in their hands, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. So went through the process. I always had a lot of doctors in the room with me, a lot of student doctors. I was a young Black girl with this disease, and I never saw any other Black people. So I thought that I was, an anomaly or something, that they had to all be around to treat me and learn because I was the only Black person in the world with this disease, right? So
I'm not laughing at you, but you were going to save the world, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Because, it was my duty. All I saw was
they was gonna steal themselves from you.
Right. When I had all these doctors and students in the room, I didn't look at it as abnormal.
Right.
Yeah.
It was something that needed to be done. So I think about 3 years after in my journey, I was offered surgery. So I was given a ileostomy, everything, total colectomy with the rectum, all of that, the muscles and everything were gone, and given a pouch. And so when I finally got my records in August, I found out that they wrote in my chart that I was not doing well on the medication, that surgery was the next option, but I wasn't given any medication.
Wow.
Okay, I'm going to take a moment to process what you said. Recap, I guess. You were about 3 years into your journey of diagnosis. The only thing you had been really given was steroids. You hadn't really been given any course of medication outside of steroids. You saw, once you got your records in August, reading through them, that the reason that you were offered surgery 3 years after your diagnosis was due to you being non-responsive to medication that you had not been given, prescribed, or delivered, anything like that.
Yep.
Am I correct?
That's right.
And that's why they gave you a surgery that would remove your colon that maybe you never needed removed.
Right.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood this. You understand this, Matthew?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Okay.
I think, when I hear that story, I think a lot about just medical malpractice, and how oftentimes Black and brown bodies are treated as experiments. So just really empathize, and I'm sorry that happened to you. I think that's really tough. And I think that's the way race and racism works, right?
Absolutely.
We get in these positions I didn't know that you were from Mississippi. So in that context, a lot of this makes a lot of sense. We get in these positions where there is an authority figure who isn't giving us information. We're not seen as human. And people just tend to practice on our bodies. That's probably why there were a lot of students in there, because they were like, this is a learning opportunity for us, rather than this is a person whose life that we can change and save. And so, yeah, it's really tough to hear that. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thank you.
Let's pause for a second because I think I'm getting just a slight headache for a moment. Chrissy, your story is a little different from Latonia's. Can you share your journey and your entry? You said that Jaden, your son, he was diagnosed at 11. Let's back it up to before he was diagnosed, because I don't think there's anyone prior to Jaden in your family that has this disease. So how did we get there?
So not that we're aware of. We
Okay.
aren't aware of anyone else who suffers with IBD at all. We weren't familiar with the terminology or the disease. And honestly, as I look back, Jaden was never particularly healthy, even as a baby, even as a toddler. We spent a lot of time in the emergency room and a lot of time with these viruses and illnesses and other things that he suffered from that ultimately were inflammatory processes, and I now know to be predictors of what ended up being Crohn's disease. But when he was 11 and thriving and seemingly doing well, he started just just to fail. He started to be in pain. He started to be lethargic. And the biggest telltale sign for us was that he lost about 30 pounds in the course of 6 weeks. I mean, he just went downhill. And I watched this happen. And of course, in a family that's well-intentioned and in a community that's well-intentioned, everybody has all the answers. And so I was told he was lactose intolerant. So we went to lactose intolerance over-the-counter drugs. And I was told, perhaps it was because he was a little chubby and he was overweight, or, that these things were happening. And no one had the wherewithal, myself included, to know how severe what was happening before our eyes was until he stopped eating. When he stopped eating, I knew it was like a traumatic situation, and we took him to the hospital. We spent about 7 months in the cycle of being dismissed, misdiagnosed, placed in emergency rooms for hours on end where we had to wait. Ultimately, at the last emergency room visit, where I was at my wit's end, also at home trying to manage what I thought was maybe food allergy, maybe lactose intolerance myself.
Right.
Ultimately, in a room, a emergency room healthcare team told me that it was likely something with his gallbladder, and they sent me home. But also in that room, I heard them speak the word gastroenterologist. And I didn't grow up knowing about specialists. Like, we went to the primary doctor and we came home. So we didn't discuss specialists. I think that might have even been maybe my first introduction to that, but it certainly was my first introduction to the word itself.
Right.
And so I went home, and he was still in pain, and he was still starting to decline. And I thankfully went on the internet. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I looked up the word gastroenterologist, and immediately a pediatric gastroenterologist at Hopkins came up, and I called out of the blue, and somehow there was a cancellation, and he saw us 2 days later.
Amazing.
And
Wow.
I will tell you, after all of that, after all of those months, we walked into his office. My mother was with me, Jaden and myself. At the time, he was 11, weak, horrible condition. We walked across the threshold of the treatment room. He looked at him and he said, he has Crohn's disease. Never touched him, never examined him, anything. He said, he has Crohn's disease, and I will prove it to you with a colonoscopy.
Wow.
And that started our journey.
Wow. And he was 11 years old.
He was 11 years old.
And was this an adult gastro, or was this a pediatric?
It was a
gastro?
pediatric gastroenterologist.
Okay.
It was a male, someone who had roots outside of the country,
Okay.
but someone who had dealt with enough pediatric Crohn's disease patients
Yes.
that he was able to identify it by
Wow.
his malnutrition, by his jaundice.
Wow.
And ultimately, through an examination, he had fissures, which was another telltale sign, and he confirmed it with a colonoscopy. What was interesting is I still didn't know what Crohn's disease was. And so we left that office in disarray. I cried all the way home. I actually got into a minor car accident on the way home because I was so distraught and not paying attention.
Right.
I still didn't know what it was. I thought it was fatal. I thought, this is it. Like, no one had explained it to me. And thankfully, we live in the age of the internet. So I was able to go home and look it up, but we certainly didn't know anyone in our Black community, in our village, that had ever had it or had ever heard of it.
So they didn't navigate by giving you any materials or anything once you left that office?
So no. So actually what they did do, and I give all credit to this process, because I think our process was a little bit more appropriate, only because of the severity of where he was when I brought him in. So we had been months with nothing. So when we brought him in, he was severely malnourished. He was dehydrated. He was jaundiced. He was not thriving. And so we literally had the colonoscopy a day or two after that visit.
Wow.
He basically, was like, we're going to fast track this. We were at the hospital. Next thing you know, we were put in a pediatric waiting room at Johns Hopkins, which that's where everyone who has the most severe everything is. And so literally we're sitting in a room with children that we knew were terminal. We're sitting in the room with children with no limbs, children with cancer, children with,
That's
and
scary.
it really put it into perspective though. And it was my son who then said, you know what, I think we got to stop crying, Mom, because look at, what's around me. He had the foresight and the insight to say that. He had the colonoscopy, and when the doctor came out of the colonoscopy, he looked me in my eye and he said, I need you to trust me. Now, I knew this man for about 4 days. He said, I need you to trust me. He said, it's aggressive. He said, it's one of the most aggressive cases that I've seen. It's severe. We have to go directly to something called a biologic. We're not going to wait for any other steroid any surgery, any other trials of medication, we have to go directly to the most aggressive treatment. Will you trust me? And I stood in the hallway and I said, I will trust you.
And what year was this, Chrissy?
This was 2011,
Okay.
in June of 2011.
Interesting.
Yeah, you asked about navigation, and I just heard a lot of lack of navigation really early on in that journey, right? I think you didn't even get a recommendation to go to a gastro. You had to just sort of hear the word over here, and then decide on your own will to look it up.
Yes.
And I think really grateful that, I think cancellation led to the appointment, led to the colonoscopy, and then to a diagnosis and treatment. But oftentimes, we play this waiting game, right? Where we're going to the emergency department, we're seeing different doctors, we're seeing emergency physicians, family physicians, and folks who won't recommend we go see a specialist. And so it's just, again, I think thank you for sharing that story, and I'm sorry that happened, but I'm glad that the colonoscopy did happen and that diagnosis was then made.
But not only that we don't go see the specialist, we don't know to navigate to a specialist.
Yeah. But she should have been told to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Even from the emergency room, because where do you go next? Because the emergency room isn't supposed to be your course of care. Like, just keep coming back here. Where were they telling you to go from the emergency room?
Home. And so there was a distinct lack of care and concern, a dismissiveness.
Yeah.
Ultimately, as we worked with the same gastroenterologist in pediatrics until he aged out, which was just last year. He stayed until he was 22. And again, I have a great deal of appreciation. But one of the things he would always say is, I treat a lot of Black boys, and Black boys just won't complain. They'll be in pain. And that was actually representative of our case. They'll be in pain. They'll be not doing well. And I ask them, and they'll just not complain. And it was complete misunderstanding of why Black people, Black boys, Black community, Black families don't complain. Because when we do complain, either we can be easily dismissed, we can be mocked, we can be ignored, we can be emasculated, specifically for Black men and young Black boys. And there was no understanding of that. He would always ask me as if it was my, role to have to answer that question. Black boys maybe don't complain because there's no safety.
But I think that's part of the issue. I think that there's a stigma about the word complain.
Yes.
We're not complaining. We're sharing
reporting.
that there's a
Yes.
problem.
Right.
We're reporting that there's an issue, and you're saying, why are you complaining? I'm not complaining. I'm sharing that I've got an issue that I need your help with, and you're viewing it as complaining. And if I complain, then someone's going to tell me I need to suck it up.
That's
so I'm
right.
not going to share my issue because you're going to take it and perceive it as a complaint. And no one helps people who complain.
Absolutely.
So there's no reason for me to share. That's why our people aren't sharing their issues that need resolution, because you're not willing to resolve them, because you're viewing them as complaints.
And that's also why we go so long. And ultimately, later on, I, not only became a student of IBD, but also someone that started working and married it with my career working in the industry. And we found that most often that the most irreparable damage happens during those periods of time
Yes.
where we're not listened to, and
Yes.
where our community members aren't treated, and where we aren't taken at face value for what we're sharing. And the harm can't be undone.
Right, right. So Latonia, I want to go back to you, to unpack some of your story. Now, after, we're going to go back a little bit, because now we skipped this middle part, that we went from you having your surgery and then fast forwarding to getting your records and then finding out huge misjustice had occurred, right? It's something
Yes.
crazy and inappropriate. But there was a time in the middle that you had stopped going to your providers. Can you share why you had decided and determined that navigating your healthcare with your providers no longer served you?
Yes. After I had my surgery, I researched and ended up getting another surgery, which is called a continent ileostomy, which is an internal pouch. So after I got the continent ileostomy, my specialist did not want to treat me anymore. So they were playing ping pong with me to go back and forth with the surgeon. And then when I would go in with issues, they would treat me as if I was drug seeking. And I just really got tired of going. I said, I can just manage, self-medicate, treat myself. And I just didn't want to do it anymore because I wasn't feeling like I was being heard or being treated. No one really, I didn't feel like I was a service to them anymore, so they didn't really want to be bothered with me anymore. So I'm like, I'll go where I'm celebrated, not tolerated.
Yes.
And I just stopped going. So
What got you back?
I became a part of Color of Crohn's and Chronic Illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw so many people, Black people, who were going through this journey. And I was like an old veteran, right? So I'm like 30 years in, and these are fresh faces, fresh in this. And I wanted to tell them how to be better, how to be well, how to be healthy.
But were you well?
That's the point. I couldn't tell them and mother them the way I wanted to if I was not taking care of myself. So in essence, you know, you were kind of pushing me to go see about myself. And then also I couldn't help others if I didn't see about myself. I wanted to make sure that I could tell them it's okay. But I had to believe it myself. So that's what made me go back to the doctor.
And so navigate that with us. Tell us what happened.
I wasn't well, and I put on a big show because, you know, as Black people, as the doctor said, we don't want to complain, so we figure out how to deal with it. And so I've been on pain medications, everything for years. So I found a doctor that I can trust, and I went in and she did the complete workup. Come to find out, I had gastritis, H. pylori, Crohn's. You know, it's still even hard for me to say because I went through 30 years with ulcerative colitis and I really got Crohn's.
Yeah.
So that was hard. But I got on, she put me on a biologic, and then I cried because I didn't want to take the biologic. And I was like, I've never been on, I got to take a shot, you know? So, because I was just like, what, just cut it out. Can you cut the Crohn's out?
Oh.
Yes, cut it out, right?
Yes, you were.
And she kind of looked at me like, bless her heart.
Right.
No, we can't cut
I'm
it
gonna
out.
tell you see people think they're better than Crohn's people.
Yes,
They do. So that was our whole thing. And I kept saying, you know what it is? She's like, I can't have Crohn's. I said, listen, you UC people swear you better than Crohn's people. You're not better than us. You're not better than
IBD
us.
beef.
right. Turf war and stuff going on here.
Like, no, you're the whole gastrointestinal tract. We over here, we just in one space. No, they think they're better than us.
I was there. I was like, just cut it out. I'm good. We can go back to an external pouch. We good. What you got to do? She said, you're going to take this medicine.
Yes.
So I took the medication and I actually felt something I hadn't felt before.
Good.
Yeah, I was like, dang, this what normal feel like?
Yeah.
I was kind of feeling some kind of way. I don't even know if I can explain it even to today because I felt a different kind of normal. Mm-hmm. I actually felt it was, you know, like getting out the bed. I could do stuff. I had extra energy. I was like, dang, I've been missing out. So now I look forward to my shot every time it's due. So
yeah, I see so many people make that decision, right? Like this healthcare provider, this healthcare system is not doing what I needed to do. So rather than, you know, deal with this discrimination, racism, or whatever you're facing there, I'm just going to remove myself, knowing all of the risks that may occur. And so really encouraged to hear that Melody really forced you to get back into care. But I think that's just something that we could probably sit with, the decision for people to say, hey, I know I'm going to be unwell, even if I decide not to engage, but engaging with this system is actually doing me harm. Yeah. And I think that's just a tough decision that we see a lot of people have to make when they're deciding on, you know, whether or not to continue to seek care.
It's funny because she always says, I did it. I didn't force her. I didn't force her. What I believe that we did is we did it together, because we're so much more inclined as a community to do something when we know somebody's with us. I know that Latonia knew I was going to be with her no matter what her decision was, even if she didn't go to the doctor. If she decided that she wasn't going to give healthcare an opportunity and a chance to see if it would work for her, she knew I was going to be with her regardless. It was just the fact that I was going to be with her. I think that was the value there. Just like Chrissy knows I will be with her. I know Chrissy will be with me. You know I'm going to be with you. We don't have those spaces enough. We don't have enough of people saying they're going to be there with us. And if we have more of those, we're inclined to move. And COGI has done that. Black Health has done that. Showing up in those spaces, just having those conversations where we don't have access to people that'll give us answers or talk us through something and explain the language, the literacy aspect of things, or navigate to why there's a issue with pre-auth, or why I have to go and deal with non-medical switching, why there's a barrier here. When those conversations happen with people that aren't getting something, don't stand to gain something from it, that now invites us to make a move because someone stopped their life to say that my life mattered more than where their vantage point was. You know, it matters. That stuff mattered. And what Latonia heard, all she heard me say was, I know. When she said, this doesn't work for me and I don't care, and she was fighting me, all I gave her was a quick, I know. And she knew that I knew. It wasn't Chrissy speaking to her from the lens of, I'm a parent navigating this. It was a patient who had been in the mud, who'd been in the trenches. You can't argue with someone who's walked the same walk. It's not the parent saying, do this because I said so. It's me like, yeah, I know. They did that to my butt too. They did that to my gut too. They did that to my arm too. I was in that bed too. So you can't argue with that because it's like, dang it, she's got me there. Okay, well, if you do it, I'm going to do it too. Okay, I did it. So now what do you have to say? You can't do anything but do it because I called your bluff. And the bluff actually worked in her favor because she can sit here. She and I, I'm sharing on this podcast and I have her here, but she and I call each other 40-40. It just so happens that when she's sick, I'm sick. So she'll be 40%, I'll be 40%, but together we're 80.
Okay.
So we just need to get together. We just need to be together and we can knock it out because we're going to be 80%. But when we're apart, we're 40. So don't call us. You just got to get us together so we can get it done. But I'm so blessed and fortunate to be able to have that space. Just like I know if I'm at that space with either one of you, and my hope is that other folks, people that are watching that, we can give them, if they're at 40%, just hearing us, seeing any one of us, they can get that 40% if they're 40%. They can get that from us so that they know that by tapping into something we're saying or calling or hearing, that they now have that peace and they're not the blame for whatever's happening to them.
Yeah, Chrissy, I was listening to your story from the parent perspective and really just thinking about, I would love to hear you talk about how you talked to your son, prepared your son for that journey that you were sort of learning what he was going to be on, and how you continue to talk through, this is what the illness is, this is what you're experiencing. What is that like?
I'll be honest with you, and I know that everyone doesn't agree with maybe my methodology in mothering him through living with a chronic and incurable illness. But I decided at 11 years old that he had enough to bear at that point. Like he was, at that time I was a single parent, he was sick, he's black, he was a boy, he's big in physique. I knew that he
stacked
had,
against him.
Yeah, he had challenges, and I made the decision, much to people's criticism, that I was not going to add this burden onto him. And so, to be very honest, I completely managed his health care and still do.
Wow.
He is thriving. He's going into his third year of law school, and I have removed the burden from him.
But wait, Chrissy, tell them what that looks like, though, managing his health care.
So, I mean, it looks like a lot of things. All the way along the path of him actually being, a minor, it looked like coordinating with a number of specialists. And the way his disease manifests, his IBD is fairly stable. but all of we call them extracurricular associated disorders and diseases are not. And so some of those are co-occurring, some of those are results of the medication, and we see a whole lot of specialists. So we stay with dermatologists and cardiologists and all of these other ophthalmologists and rheumatologists and all of these other ologists. Listen, someone who knew not one name of one specialty now knows all of those, right?
Yeah.
So it's just been a lot to navigate. And I wanted him as much as possible to have his childhood. And so I gave that to him. When the doctor said, oh, you can't play sports, he played sports within reason and with his helicopter mom there overseeing it to make sure he would be okay. When they said, he couldn't, possibly go to college because the stress of that would exacerbate his illness, he not only went to college on a full presidential scholarship, but he excelled, and he's actually in law school out of state, and we do what it takes to bring him back to Maryland every single 6 weeks.
Chrissy, are you dropping mics or what are you doing?
Am I doing what?
Dropping mic drop?
What does that mean?
You just put some respect in your name? I know
I did. I really did.
My parents and stuff.
She said my cultural competency, though. I'm not with it. Tell me, help me.
Right. But listen, no, here's the thing, because with that and talking about the blame game, do you know how many times specifically as he started to age out of pediatrics, people told me, coworkers told me, friends told me, family members told me, like, you're doing too much. Like, he should be making the calls. He should be sitting on hold waiting to make the appointments. He should be advocating for himself. And now he does in large part, but he does not carry that burden, because as long as I can carry it for him, I shall. Yep. And that, I believe wholeheartedly, has allowed him to live a full life and to be as successful as he needs to be. And at the time that I feel like he needs to fully pick up the mantle, he'll do so, because he's watched me do it, so he knows how to navigate it. But it does not kill me as his mother to make the calls. Listen, we get marginalized at every turn. He experiences all kinds of bias in healthcare settings at every single turn. And I am there, and I am the force that they know. The first thing we did when he went over to adult treatment is I made sure they understood that I would be able to speak on his behalf. I would be able to go into the rooms. I would be able to speak as his proxy. And if there was a problem with that, we were going to have a whole problem. Because the burden of navigating a system that is not set up to be safe for you is not okay, specifically for children. And so that's how we've navigated. Now, I can tell you a whole lot about Crohn's disease, probably more than he can. But as he continues to live and journey through life, when he needs to learn things and know things, we talk about them, and I pass on that knowledge. And he has a full understanding that this is lifelong, that he will need to know the ins and outs. But for right now, he can lean on me, and he can live his life fairly unburdened, and I'll pick up the rest until I can't do so.
Yeah, I imagine law school is enough of a burden.
Isn't it, right? And just living life. I mean, so one of the reasons why, and Melody is a big advocate for him to have a voice, and I believe that'll happen when he's ready, because he needs to be representation for other young men specifically that look like him, to understand that you can still live a full life and navigate this disease, that you can still walk in power. You don't have to be fragile to be fragile, right? He is fragile internally, but he doesn't have to be fragile externally. He can still walk in power and in success. And so he needs to be representation, but he's not ready for this to be his calling card yet. And I'm okay with that. I know it'll come, because he has a servant's heart and he has gratitude, but it's okay that today's not his moment, but he'll get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Latonia, I want to move to you being the director of community and culture within COGI. You are the support for many members, especially the ambassadors in the community. How often do you hear them share their stories about being blamed or told that it is their fault or for their delay or their challenges as they're navigating their disease?
I hear it daily.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I had to talk through it with my therapist.
Wow.
Because I was going through a compassion fatigue. Because you can't really help, you just have to be an ear to listen.
Right.
And you can guide them and help them with the resources, but the pain and the damage that they've already gone through, you can't
go
fix.
Back. Right.
So we hear it more often than I would like to admit. It's always the patient's fault, what you ate. You even have people asking patients about their sexual stuff. And why would you ask somebody that,
I think it becomes really challenging, especially when there are different communities that we're serving. If they're not asking them these questions to navigate them, to support them, when they're using these questions as a space of shame and to put them in more places that will diminish their health and burden them mentally and emotionally, they're causing detriment to the patient as opposed to adding value. And those things to me should actually be reported.
Yeah.
Because it's harmful. It's harmful to their management. It's harmful to their navigation. And it presents now a burden and a barrier to their care. And that should be reported or they should fire the physician.
Yeah, because the patient walks away thinking they've done something wrong, feeling in their heart that they know they haven't done anything wrong.
Yes.
But then it goes back to, well, my doctor said that I did something wrong, so I must have done something wrong.
Yes.
So you're battling within, trying to figure this thing out, and you're still feeling very lonely.
I just met a lady not yesterday, when we were at our conference. She said that she just had a colonoscopy like 2 days before our conference when we were in Atlanta.
Wow.
And she said, I was just diagnosed with Crohn's, but when I woke up from the colonoscopy, whenever the day was, it just happened, she said, the doctor said, you have Crohn's, but the first thing we need to discuss is you having bariatric surgery, so make an appointment with my office. And I said, what? I cannot believe this physician said that to you when you're coming back from like anesthesia. She said, yes, but I have a lot of other medical challenges happening. I said, set some time to talk to me. I want to see how I can help you navigate and get you with a more compassionate provider so we can help you, manage some of these other comorbidities that you're probably navigating through. I know this is hard. I said, but there are physicians that care. Yeah. And you also should now commit to seeing a therapist just so that you can get your mental health supported, because that's not healthy. So this is, unfair and it's unfortunate, but that was harmful to this woman who's scared, who hasn't been well. And I could see that she's a beautiful woman, but she doesn't look well. And so her not looking well and not feeling well, that was fearful. Like, how dare you say this as someone who's supposed to care for somebody? So I know what our community members hear. And this is like another level to what people are hearing as they're trying to just figure out how they can get well.
Yeah. Sad.
It's very sad. And as also in this space, you as a person who's navigating your own mental health care, you just put something in play, therapy. What do we do at COGI to support people with their mental health?
Well, we have different programs. We have a huge program, Together IBD, where we actually once a month have a therapist come on and talk. And it's like a big family. Everyone loves Together IBD. You come on, it's virtual, so you don't have to go out of the comfort of your own home. And we have a professional there, but we also have the community there. Yeah. So they're able to talk through things that they're going through.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier about it's different when you're talking to someone who's been there.
Yes.
Because your I know is different from my mom's I know, because she doesn't.
Right.
But on Together IBD, when you have 30 to 50 people who say, I know, and it's going to be okay. I went through that myself. It really helps. And it's a kickstart. A lot of people have not gone to therapy before, but going to Together IBD, it's kind of a kickstart for their own mental health journey.
Yes.
So after that, we've heard several people who actually found therapists after going to Together IBD.
For sure. And I think that's been the pathway for a lot of our members in our community to say, you know what, mental health is kind of cool. I probably should have talked to somebody a while ago.
And it, there's a stigma in our community.
Yes.
Sure.
You don't tell all them people your business.
Right.
Or I ain't crazy. I ain't gonna go.
Right. I think number one is you're talking to somebody about your mental health. You crazy? That's like the follow-up question,
What's
right?
wrong with you?
Right.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? What you got going on? Such and such is crazy.
Yes.
I'm like, I am crazy. That's right. Like, I've been crazy. I know I'm crazy, so I'm going to go talk to somebody. But it's not crazy. You're actually so together to actually say, let me go talk about this because I want to make sure I am mentally well for myself and for others and people that I serve.
It's a very, very sane thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think a question that I've been thinking about throughout this discussion is, I think each of you probably went from a moment where it's like, I need to advocate for myself, my family, those around me. So like, actually, I need to advocate on behalf of this community, these people that are like me, have this similar experience. I'd love to hear, for anyone who wants to answer, what that thought process and inspiration was like to move you from, hey, this isn't really just about me anymore. This is really about our people, specifically when we think about IBD.
Well, Chrissy, you got to back it up and actually tell where you came from, because you're not just a parent who was advocating for his son. You actually ran a whole movement on Crohn's and colitis.
So I have my career is in nonprofit executive leadership, and I had the opportunity to work for a inflammatory bowel disease organization where I ran a region for a little bit over 4 years for the organization. And at that organization, I happened to just be the first and only, and I believe only since, executive director who was a Black person.
Wow.
So there's a lot of pressure there. And there's also just a lot of awareness as to how Black communities, people of color, are left out of the conversation and left out of the initiatives and the efforts and consideration. But for my own story, going back to just my son being diagnosed, I felt alone, and I felt a lot of shame and ridicule coming from friends, from my own family members. People say anything when they don't know what it is. They'll say, oh, that happened because you let him eat at McDonald's. That happened because you eat frozen food. That happened because he's overweight. And, imagine being a parent already navigating this situation and then having to deal with what feels like shame and blame from people who should care, who should care enough to read a brochure or a pamphlet and find out what it is.
Yes.
There have been people who told me, he'll be fine if you just give him vegetables. He'll be fine. It's because you haven't given him vitamins. Everybody has a medical degree suddenly when somebody gets sick. So I saw the need for advocacy just because of that, because I didn't find support even just among people that looked like me and people who I know love us. But then as we experience infraction after infraction, navigating the healthcare system, navigating him going to college and needing accommodations, navigating him finding dignity in the school system. I literally have had knockdown dragouts with PE teachers, other teachers who refused to allow him to be released to go to the restroom, other teachers who tried to say that he had to participate when he knew he didn't feel up to participating, and then stripped him of his dignity when he needed accommodations. So we've navigated all of this. So it's been very clear to me all along that this can't just be us, right? There's something to this. What I will say is that I believe this happens to all people who are experiencing chronic illness and disability.
Yes.
But then add to that what we know is a world filled with structural racism, bias, hatred, and inherent discrimination. Black people and people of color are going to experience this just more tragically.
Yes.
And so for me, one of the things that hit me when Melody started talking on this discussion is she mentioned that you all were navigating a life in this. And I really think that's what it is. It's not advocacy. This is life.
Yes.
This is real life. And the same way he'll live with this his whole life, I will live with this for the rest of mine. And so it is an unwavering commitment to make sure that, number one, he has a better opportunity, but certainly everybody that comes behind him and alongside him has one as well. And that requires all of us to speak out, be fearless, be what is not typical in our community, meaning willing to talk about things and to be honest and tell the truth, not to die with our secrets and our medical history as Black people, and to be very strong advocates. You said, is it in your family? And I'm saying no, but the real truth is, how would I know? Because in our families, we don't talk about these things. And specifically when they're not attractive and sexy, we think we need to die with our secrets. And so, I'm really passionate.
You dropping bars. I love it.
You were supposed to say that for the deuce, though.
We have to do this. I got more, Mel.
Okay. Okay. Remix.
Yes. All of that.
Yeah.
But and when you said family members dying with secrets, my grandmother died of stomach cancer, and I just found out what she died of, because no one talks, about what's going on. When I started speaking out, and I'm still doing it rare, but I'm coming along.
Proud of you.
But when I started posting and speaking out, because I saw so many beautiful Black people going through this, and they looked up to me, and I felt that if I said something, they would take into consideration and try it or learn from it. When I started speaking out, I had family members in my DM
Yes.
saying, hey, your aunt and your uncle have this, and oh yeah, and by the way, your grandmother had stomach cancer when she died.
Wow.
So, I have children. My son has stomach problems all the time. I have grandchildren, 5 grandchildren. Thank you very much.
First of all, that is amazing.
So I have to do it for them.
Right.
I have to try to make this better some kind of way. I don't want people to have to go through the let me figure it out journey like I had to go through it.
For sure.
So.
Oh, you want me to answer that?
Please.
So it's interesting because, well, COGI, right? So yes, I had to do something when I determined that I had a disease, but I believe that it happened when it, like the onset of the really tragic part of it, having all those fistulas and the losing my mobility and just feeling like the quality of my life deteriorated extremely fast. It was rapid. I'm like, whoa, God, you just gave me a whole sweep of tragedy in like 3 months. I was about to lose my life. Why did you do that fast? What were you trying to tell me? I'm listening. What is it? What is it? What is it? And I felt so strongly that he was like, you have to do something, because I've slow walked it for all these years, from pains at 5 or 6 years old to rectal bleeding at 13 years old to all these stomach aches and mobility issues and all of these things slow, like they were happening through all these years. And when all of that happened so rapidly and finally getting to diagnosis and then sharing it and then seeing all of these people tell me they're the first or only Black person and no one in all these years doing anything about it. Yeah. What else was I really supposed to do? You know me. Like anyone who knows me, if there's a problem, I'm a resolution person. I'm going to find something to resolve. Yep. And I didn't even know what. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I needed to do something. So even if I really thought I was just building a group for people to find each other, that was fine for me, because at least they would find each other, because I knew the people that were messaging me were suffering and hurting. And I always feel like people can do so much. They thrive in communities. Grass grows in community. Trees grow, vines, roots, everything thrives when it has something to grow with. That's all I thought I was doing. By the grace of God, it's something so much greater, bigger, fuller. But I just thought I was helping people find each other. I knew that it was going to be more than just a drop in the bucket. But he gave me a problem to solve, and by his grace, it's so much more.
It's amazing. That's amazing. So we've reached our final segment of this conversation, where we'll ask you to drop a deuce. And really, we want to take your 2 major takeaways that you want to leave with the audience. So we'll start with Latonia and then go to Chrissy next.
2 major takeaways. I would say find community. That by far is the biggest thing that I can say, because when you meet people who go through what you go through and actually feel like you and look like you trust them. I can go to the community when I'm about to take a new medicine. Hey, how did this medicine make you feel? It might not do me the same way, but now I feel okay knowing that it made you okay, right?
You're still alive.
Find community. And the second thing, research. It's okay to network and find doctors. It's okay to fire a doctor if you need to. If they're not treating you right. So it's okay to do your own research when it comes to your health care and speak up for yourself. And one of the things that we have that is so wonderful is that Confident Conversations booklet, where it guides you through how to ask questions to your physician, because sometimes we don't know, and you can write your answers down before you get there. So find community, and it's okay to ask questions and research and find new doctors.
Just like 4 things. Cool.
Oh, all of that.
A couple deuces.
I have just my two things, and I would say the first one is pull from compassion.
Yes.
And I say that because we have been in some settings where we've had an outstanding physician or an outstanding nurse practitioner or an outstanding appointment scheduler or an outstanding, aide. We've never been in a setting where we've had all those things at once. And that's very difficult to
Yes.
go into a space where you want safety and you love maybe the care you're getting from the physician, but you have contention from, staff or other people in the setting who don't lead with compassion.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately no one gets into these jobs of being healthcare professionals or in that environment to harm people.
Yeah.
But I think life is life and humanity is what it is. And so when people are ungrateful or when they deal with their own challenges or when they have biases, sometimes that's going to come out. So you have to realize that and then pull from compassion, knowing that you are in positions to really help or harm people. And then the last thing I have is to give grace. Because what I will say is that our journey has been made more difficult by people who just didn't understand but didn't seek to understand
Yes. Yeah.
what this is like, what living with a chronic illness is like for him, what parenting with a chronic illness is like for me, what being a sibling to someone with a chronic illness is like for his brother. This has been a journey, and it's interesting because so many people who didn't give us grace, who didn't take time to learn, who didn't stop to think about what this looks like in conjunction with everything else we deal with as people, as Black people in the society. One thing my mother always said is just live long enough. And unfortunately, some of those people have now encountered whatever their own thing is to tackle,
Yes.
whatever their own thing
Yes.
is to overcome. And if you just live long enough, there'll be something that you have to deal with and live with. And that's why you have to find grace in your heart to give to other people, because your time is coming. If you live long enough, you'll have to deal with something, and it'll be whatever it is your lot to deal with. But if you give grace to others, it'll be given back unto you when it's your time to experience your own life's journey.
Thanks so much, ladies. This has been a really awesome episode on the blame game. We appreciate you for joining us. We hope to see you again. Until then, thanks for tuning in.
Running through it with the young influence, adolescent presence, I'm succumbing to it. I've been giving yeses when I shouldn't do it. I complete ejected, but the moves elusive and I'm barely moving, but I'm still gon' boost 'em. I can't work on winnings when I know you're losing, so I whip the winnings and they throw the deuces. Guess I had to pivot, shooting up bazookas for the facts.